There are certain words that carry a number of implicit associations, words that can evoke all sorts of abstract concepts or even emotional responses. One such word is heart. As is common in the English language, this word may be interpreted to have several meanings. It might be interpreted as the center of an object or the essential truth underlying a set of circumstances. It may be regarded as the emotional core of a person, or perhaps the place where one's will resides. It may even be largely synonymous with will itself, or strength of one sort or another. In biology, of course, the word generally refers to a specific sort of organ found in many animal groups. Put simply, a heart in this sense is a muscular chamber that serves as a pump to circulate fluid through the body. There are a surprising number of variations on this basic underlying pattern, though. It is reasonable to assume that, as far as hearts are concerned, a human is most familiar with the human heart. The heartbeat is a constant background to our existence, a persistent rhythm that indicates ongoing life. More than this, variations in the frequency and intensity are readily associated with changes in mood and often intense emotions. Terms like heart-stopping or heart-pounding are not at all uncommon. In humans, as well as other mammals, birds, and crocodilians, the heart is a four-chambered pump. 2 atria receive blood, which moves on to fill a pair of ventricles. As the atria contract, the ventricles are nearly full already. When the ventricles contract, it is with a force sufficient to drive blood to the lungs on one side and throughout the rest of the body on the other. These contractions are coordinated by a sophisticated electrical system consisting of modified cardiac cells and the heart muscle itself. Interestingly, even individual cardiac muscle cells contract with an inherent rhythm, without any outside stimulation. The pacemaker and associated fibers are there to regulate the timing of heart contractions rather than cause them. Perhaps it is better to say they cause the various portions of the heart muscle to contract at the proper time and in the proper sequence. Another intriguing quality of cardiac muscle is its interconnected nature. Unlike most cells in the body, cardiac muscle cells are all directly and deeply connected to their neighbors. They share cytoplasm through specialized structures known as gap junctions. These gap junctions also allow electrical signals to pass directly from cell to cell. This is vital for proper heart function. If the signals for contraction were to travel indirectly, as they do at neural synapses, it might take several minutes for a single signal to find its way from one end of the heart to the other. With the gap junctions, the contraction signal spreads smoothly through the entire heart muscle in a fraction of a second. The sound of a heartbeat is not produced by these muscle contractions, at least not directly. There are 4 one-way valves associated with the heart. These keep blood flowing in the right direction in response to the contraction of the chambers. 2 of these valves are found between the atria and the ventricles, while the other 2 are found between the ventricles and the outgoing arteries. The valves open when blood passes through them in the proper direction. The sound of a heartbeat is generated by the valves closing and the recoil of blood pressing against these closed valves. The first pulse of a heartbeat is the sound of the first pair of valves closing as the ventricles begin to contract, while the second pulse is the sound of the second pair of valves closing as the ventricular contraction finishes. It is worth noting that this characteristic rhythm is among the first sounds any human ever hears. In the womb, there is the constant background noise of the maternal heartbeat. Some have theorized that the nearly universal presence of rhythm in music may be an outgrowth of this sound. It wouldn't surprise me, as the fetal nervous system essentially develops with what amounts to a constant musical accompaniment in this regard. It is difficult to properly speak about any heart without at least touching upon the associated circulatory system. After all, the entire purpose of a heart is the movement of blood or some equivalent fluid through the circulatory system. Well, perhaps that isn't entirely true. In humans and many other vertebrates, the heart also produces a hormone known as atrial natriuretic peptide, or ANP for short. This is one of several hormones that collectively regulate ion concentrations in the blood. Apparently, when the blood pressure in the atria gets too high, ANP release is increased, leading ultimately to a greater excretion of sodium in the kidneys. This leads to greater water loss from the blood via the kidneys as well, hopefully lowering the overall blood pressure. It also tends to cause blood vessels to dilate, which also reduces blood pressure. While ANP is produced in the atria, there is another similar hormone produced in the ventricles. It is sometimes known as brain natriuretic peptide, which is something of a problem since it is not produced in the brain and does not appear to act especially upon the brain. Another name for the substance is B-type natriuretic peptide. Either way, the abbreviation is BNP. Along with its normal function in the body, BNP is important because elevated levels tend to be an indicator of an overloaded heart, which usually means heart failure of some sort or another. Returning to the circulatory system, it is probably worth taking a moment to clear up a minor misconception that people often have. Arteries do not necessarily carry oxygenated blood, and veins do not necessarily carry deoxygenated blood. By definition, arteries carry blood away from the heart under higher pressure, while veins return blood to the heart under lower pressure. The blood vessels have structural differences that allow them to function properly under these different pressures. So, in humans at least, pulmonary arteries carry high-pressure deoxygenated blood away from the heart to the lungs, while pulmonary veins bring low-pressure oxygenated blood to the heart from the lungs. This general arrangement is seen in all of the vertebrates with four-chambered hearts. However, there are some variations on this in other vertebrate groups. In the case of most reptiles, there is an incomplete partition between the ventricles, so there is a degree of mixing between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. In amphibians, there is only one ventricle, which receives blood from two atria. One of these atria receives oxygenated blood from the lungs, the skin, and the lining of the mouth, while the other receives blood from the rest of the body. As reptiles and amphibians have a lower metabolism than birds and mammals, such hearts are sufficient for their oxygen requirements. It is a similar case with fish, though the heart in these creatures is even simpler. A fish heart has only two chambers, one atrium and one ventricle. Blood enters this heart from the body, and it is pumped out to the gills for oxygenation. The blood then continues from the gills to the rest of the body tissues before returning to the heart. It should come as no great surprise that many invertebrate species also have hearts and associated circulatory systems. Generally speaking, these structures are more developed in animals with higher metabolic rates or larger body sizes. Thus, any large, highly active creature should have a fairly impressive heart. However, there are a number of surprising patterns that arise in unexpected places. For example, the annelid worms. These worms include large swimming or burrowing polychaetes generally found in the ocean. They also include the more humble oligochaetes, commonly known as earthworms. Annelids are able to get their required oxygen by respiring through their skin for the most part, and their parapodia as well in the case of polychaetes. Thus, there is no clearly designated gill or lung structure, and the circulatory system reflects this. Still, the blood is confined within a network of blood vessels and moved about the body by regular heart contractions. Instead of a single heart, though, an annelid has an array of paired hearts wrapped around its esophagus. Really, these hearts are little more than contractile vessels, but that is all the worm needs to get by. A more developed sort of circulation is seen in a rather different invertebrate group, the cephalopods. This group includes the squid, cuttlefish, and octopus. These particularly active mollusks have sophisticated nervous systems and complicated musculature. To support such physiology, each of these creatures has not one heart, but three. There is a central systemic heart and a pair of smaller branchial hearts. These branchial hearts are also known as gill hearts, and as may be expected, each is associated with a gill. The branchial heart pumps blood through the gill, and this blood collects in a blood vessel leading to the systemic heart. The systemic heart then pumps the oxygenated blood to the other body tissues. Afterward, the blood finds its way back to the two branchial hearts. Just as hemoglobin allows vertebrate blood to carry more oxygen, the cephalopods have a similar protein known as hemocyanin. This protein contains copper instead of iron, and it is located in the blood plasma, while the hemoglobin of vertebrates is contained within specialized blood cells. Oxygenated hemoglobin is bright red, while deoxygenated hemoglobin is dark red. In contrast, oxygenated hemocyanin is blue, while deoxygenated hemocyanin is essentially colorless. In fact, the name hemocyanin roughly translates into blood blue. Hemoglobin, meanwhile, does not translate into blood red. It actually translates into blood protein. The term blood red would translate out into hemerythrin, which incidentally is an iron-containing respiratory pigment found in a few other invertebrate groups. To make things even more unusual, hemerythrin is actually violet when oxygenated and colorless when not. In any case, hemocyanin is also found in other mollusk groups like the gastropods and bivalves. However, these invertebrates have only one heart. Furthermore, they have what is known as an open circulatory system. This is a circulatory system where the blood is not strictly confined within vessels. In these mollusks at least, there are major blood vessels that deliver blood from the heart to the various organs, from these organs to the gills, and from the gills to the heart. The general arrangement is similar to that found in fish, although the gills are upstream of the heart rather than downstream in this case. There is another far more significant difference, though. Within the various organs, the blood simply circulates openly through the tissues. There are no capillaries. This is in contrast to the closed circulatory system seen in both the vertebrates and the cephalopods. In a closed circulatory system, if there is blood located outside of a blood vessel, something has broken. Open circulatory systems are relatively common among the invertebrates. An especially large and diverse group with such systems is the insects. In these arthropods, the heart is little more than a muscular tube running up the back of the abdomen. There are a number of openings, ostia, that take in hemolymph. This hemolymph then travels forward through an aorta until it reaches the head. That is the extent of the blood vessels found in an insect. The hemolymph exiting from the aorta flows back through the body cavity, between the various internal organs, until it is taken up again by the heart. Hemolymph is the insect equivalent of blood, though it has one significant difference. There is a lack of respiratory pigments, as hemolymph is not used for oxygen transport. Instead, in insect systems, oxygen is delivered directly through a series of branching air tubes that permeate the body tissues. As the circulatory system in these creatures does not need to deliver oxygen, a simple open system is all that is really needed. In a number of other invertebrates, there is little need for even this much. Particularly small or simple invertebrates like nematodes, flatworms, and jellyfish have no circulatory systems to speak of, and so have no hearts either. There is another rather unusual group of invertebrates that is also heartless for the most part. Most echinoderms have a water vascular system that serves adequately enough for circulation and have no hearts to speak of. A remarkable exception to this pattern is seen in certain varieties of sea cucumber, which have a closed circulatory system alongside their water vascular system. This circulatory system is associated with the respiratory trees to some extent and includes a multitude of tiny contractile elements. In other words, there are a little over 100 miniature hearts in some species that drive blood flow within this system. The variety of hearts found among the various animal species can be quite astounding overall. I suppose it would make sense that the variations seen in the creatures themselves should also be reflected within their circulatory systems. Still, at the risk of being a bit maudlin, it feels almost poetic that every distinctive creature should have its own distinctive heart, or lack thereof. Just something to think about as we listen from time to time to our own heartbeats. Thank you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this brief glimpse into the more unusual side of the natural world. If you wish to know more, here are a few things that might be worth looking into. If you found this enjoyable, feel free to leave a like. If you think others would enjoy this content, by all means, share. If you have something to say or ask about, honest comments are always welcome. If you wish to see more from this channel, a subscription would be most helpful. Until next time.